So I'm coming into the presentation today assuming that everybody is fairly new to StudentTracker or knows nothing about it. So it's going to be a very low level, in the weeds presentation with lots of details. I will mention that in addition to the basic service which we're covering today, we also have a premium service that is a newer set of functionality that was rolled out about a year ago. We will not really be talking about the premium service today. So if after this presentation you do join StudentTracker and have some questions about that, we will have separate webinars, and we also have some on-demand resources about the premium service. So we're going to go ahead and get into the presentation. I wanted to put the mission up just to let everybody know who the Clearinghouse is and what we do. We've been around for about 25 years, started out with a job to be the middleman between colleges and the Department of Ed for compliance purposes. Over those 25 years, obviously, we get lots of data for that purpose and have used that data to not only put out some national reports published by our research center, but also to give schools and institutions and even outreach customers and some high school folks information on the college enrollment, persistence, and completion patterns of their students. I also want to mention that many of the folks at the Clearinghouse, myself included, have backgrounds and careers in higher education, and we are all here because we have a love for higher education and are committed to and passionate about getting schools the information they need to make decisions that help them to entice the right students, put interventions in place that help them to retain and persist, and then ultimately complete the credential they are seeking. The next slide here talks a little bit about our coverage. The two things on here that I do want to draw your attention to are those in the circles. The burgundy circle on the left is our enrollment reporting. So these are when institutions have students enrolled for a term or a semester. They are reporting to us on a regular basis, generally about 4 times per term. That data gets loaded into our database and becomes part of our repository. And we have enrollment data for about 98% of the students in the US and then its territories. And for degree information, we have about 93%. So when you are pinging or putting in a request file to our StudentTracker system to get post-secondary data, we are able to get data with very good coverage. StudentTracker, this is sort of the little tagline that tells you what you're getting with StudentTracker. So it is your source for nationwide post-secondary education information, enrollment, and outcomes. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about how that can help you with getting information on students applying to your school or applicants, current students that are enrolled, and then students that have been to your institution and have either graduated or moved on. So I put up a couple of questions today to give you some use cases to see if StudentTracker seems like it would be of interest or a fit for you or your institution. Some of the questions that you can use StudentTracker to answer are the things on the screen. If you're trying to get information about enrollment trends, either for current, potential, or former students, StudentTracker can help with that. For the folks in IR or doing any kind of research, StudentTracker can help you there as well. If you're looking at a batch of incoming students and you want to get a complete prior academic history, you can get that from StudentTracker. And then all of our reports, which I will show you today, are user-friendly and give you data that is presented in a way that is intuitive, clear, and complete. One thing that we always talk to schools about is how they're getting information on their students, and we hear from some of them that are not using StudentTracker that they are getting this information either through survey or anecdotal information. And the piece that the Clearinghouse is able to add in is that for survey information, you often don't get good responses and people don't give honest or clear or complete information. Whereas with the Clearinghouse, we do cross state lines, we cross sector lines. As I showed you in our coverage slide a few minutes ago, we do have 98% of the enrollment. So we're able to give you a much more complete and thorough picture. Uses of StudentTracker, you'll hear some of these as we go through today, but I just want to show you on this slide how StudentTracker can benefit folks in different roles across your campus. So you could have somebody that's in enrollment reporting, trying to figure out the history of the students that are applying and what kind of majors they're coming in for. You have folks in admissions trying to figure out if they're accepting the right students and then looking at the behaviors of students that didn't attend. There are folks in IR departments that are doing some of your federal reporting. And then you have folks, of course, in career services that want to see whether the students completed, and if so, did they subsequently enroll. So as we go through today, I think you'll get a little glimpse into how StudentTracker can help with each of those roles and departments across your institution. So these are some of the departments we just mentioned, and I know this is a lot on here, and I'm certainly not going to read through it. I will post this presentation after we finish today, so you can access it online and have a look again. But we just want to give you a view of some of the ways, with several bullet points per department, of how StudentTracker can help you with your job, regardless of the department you work in. So how does the StudentTracker system or product work? The process is pretty straightforward, and I'm going to go ahead and see if I can get the rest of these pieces up here, and then we'll talk about what's on this report. So what happens is that somebody at your school, and it can be somebody in research, it can be somebody in admissions, the registrar, whomever, it doesn't matter, will submit what we call a request file. This is a file of students that you want to get post-secondary data on. That file is then submitted online through our secure FTP database, or FTP, I don't know what you call that, interface, I guess. And once you submit it through FTP, we then have a sweeper that picks that up. And depending upon what kind of information you're looking on, your file then processes through our StudentTracker system. What happens there is that we look in our system to see whether we're able to find the student. And then if we are able to find the student, we want to know whether they have records that fit the search criteria and search window, which we'll talk about in just a second. And then lastly, does the student have any FERPA blocks on those records? And then once we get all of that information, we then compile what we're able to return that's appropriate for your search into StudentTracker reports. You get an email letting you know that they are ready. You come back to that secure FTP site at that point, and you're able to access those reports. I am planning to show you examples of each of these pieces today. But before we get into the request file and the reports, I want to talk to you a little bit about the query types, and this is where you'll start to see how different folks on your campus can utilize these queries to get the information that they need. So the top 4 StudentTracker query types are those displayed on your screen. The first one is subsequent enrollment, the SE query. This is a forward-looking query, hence the forward arrow at the bottom. This is used to determine either transfer behavior or subsequent enrollment after a student left your institution, or it can also give you information on what a student is doing while they are at your institution. In other words, are they concurrently enrolled elsewhere? And for each of these queries, when you put students in the file, you are going to also give us something called a search date. And the search date defines the window that you would like to see records for. So for example, if you put in a search date of January 1st, 2018 for a subsequent enrollment query, you are then going to get records that are on or after January 1st of 2018. So you're able to very clearly narrow down the window of the records that you do and don't want. The second type of query that's the most common in StudentTracker is the DA, and this stands for either declined admission or denied admission. This query has 2 purposes. One would be for students who have applied to your institution and you have not accepted them, or students have applied to your institution, you have accepted them, yet they elected to attend elsewhere. So this is sort of what we would call a competitor query. You want to see where students who did not come to your school did go, what they enrolled in, and then how successful they were and how long it took them to complete. So you can get a view into what they did since they did not attend your institution. The third query in StudentTracker for colleges and universities is the CO or cohort query. This is where you can track a group of students, and it gives you outcomes going down in the rows and academic years going across in the columns, and you get a matrix to see initial behavior, persistence, and then whether folks completed. The cohort query is the one used for the SAM, Student Achievement Measure purpose. And in the cohort query, everybody has the same search type because we're assuming that you're following them as a group. So one of the obvious cohort query types is when folks are submitting a group of first-time fall degree-seeking students, either for federal or IPEDS reporting. But what you put in that file is up to you. So for example, if you wanted to track the behavior of a group of female, Hispanic, Pell recipient military students, then that would be the cohort you're looking for. Those would be the students you would put into your request file. You would submit that query, and then we would give you their post-secondary data. The fourth and final query we'll talk about today is the PA query. You'll notice the arrow at the bottom is different from the others, and that's because this one is a little bit of an anomaly in that it looks backwards. So the PA query stands for either prior attendance or pending admission. So if you have students that are applying to your institution and you are not sure whether everything they put on their application is complete or correct, you can get a view into their prior academic history from that search date going backwards. So if you put the search date, say, of the fall term, we would look backwards and give you all of the enrollment and degree information that we have. That would, potentially show you that you have a student applying who's been to, say, 5 or 6 other schools. They attended each for one term, and then they ultimately were not successful. So it just gives you some insight into the caliber and prior academic history of students who are applying to your institution. So on this page, this is a little snippet from our StudentTracker user guide, which is available online. These are some suggestions for search date. We do suggest that new users to the service submit files. The number of students and the number of files is unlimited. So you could certainly submit a group of students with different search dates just to try to get some understanding of how changing the search date gives you different information in the reports that you get back. So for the cohort query, a lot of times the search date is going to be the beginning of the fall or spring term. For the declined or denied admissions, that's going to be the date when the student would have started at your institution had they attended. For the prior attendance, that also is going to be the start date of the term that they would have began at your institution, and that again is looking backwards. And then finally, for subsequent enrollment, this one, when you're determining the search date, it's very much dependent upon what kind of information you're trying to get. So if you are looking for concurrent enrollment, you want to have a search date that is during the student's time or tenure at your institution, so that you can see, in addition to my school, where else is the student attending. If you're using it for subsequent enrollment or transfer behavior, your search date would be, the day that they left your institution. We would then look forward to see after that date where else did the student attend. So if you do have or elect to subscribe to our StudentTracker service and you have questions about how the search dates work for each of these queries and how they need to be adjusted to get the information you want, I'm available as your product manager. We have a customer care team, and then we have folks like Danny who are StudentTracker experts, and we'd be happy to talk you through the specifics on that. What I have up on the screen now is the initial process. So as we talked about a few slides ago, in order to get StudentTracker data, you are going to submit something called a request or submission or batch file. This file is something that is created in Excel. We do have a step-by-step guide online giving you literally piece by piece how you build this file, what goes in it, and what kind of format. This is generally done in Excel and then saved in a certain way. You then upload this to your FTP account, and then our system takes over. So as you can see for the Excel spreadsheet we have on the screen, this request file. In the first row, we're calling that a header row, so that H1 tells our system that it is a header row and tells it what to do with this particular file. So this is obviously some made up data just for illustrative purposes. So this would be your school code or your OPE ID. This would be the branch. This is the name of your school. This is the date that you're creating the file. So I put this one together obviously 3 days ago. Then you're telling the system in column F that this is a DA or declined admission query. So theoretically, these are all students that would have applied to your institution. They did not attend, and you're looking to see where the student went instead. Then in each of the student rows, you put D1, which tells our system that they're student rows. You're giving us first name, middle initial, last name, and date of birth at a minimum. You can also give us suffix as well. And then for each student in column H, as we talked about before, you're giving us a search date. So for this particular student in row 2, we have John Doe, who was born in 1980. We are looking for records for John Doe after May 1st of 2014. Then the information over here to the right is, again, school code for each and branch. And then this last row is the trailer row, and that's what tells our system that we are in at the end of the file. In order to put in a request file, you do have to have at least 11 students. Generally, if the files are smaller, they can process in about 30 minutes. If they are larger, they can take up to a day or two. We do have folks that instead of running a request or batch file, will elect to do something called a single student search in StudentTracker, and that is functionality that's built into the system. The beauty of the single student search is that you can look at for one student at a time, so it's beneficial if you don't have a group of students or if you need information on the spot. The reason I think most folks stick to a request file over single student search is that you're able to send in a group of students at once, and then you do get reports delivered to your FTP with all of their post-secondary information presented in its entirety in an organized form that you can then modify, slice and dice, save, do with as you wish, versus just getting results on your screen. So once you send in that request file, and as we talked about a few minutes ago with the process, it goes in our system. We match the students. We look to see if they have unblocked records within the search window based on the search date in column H. And then once your reports are ready, you are going to get notification to your FTP account, which is, again, the secure site where you upload and get downloads for the results. You're going to get notification that these 3 reports are ready. So for every StudentTracker query that's run, you're going to get a control report, an aggregate report, and a detail file. I am going to show you examples of these in just a second, but just to let you know what's coming, the control report is the overall report, the big numbers. How many students were submitted in your file, how many of them were able to be matched to students in our database, how many of them had FERPA blocks on their records, and how many of them were able to return with results. The aggregate report varies depending on the query type. For SE and DA queries, the aggregate report is going to show you the list of schools first attended after the search date. So if we're talking about that subsequent enrollment query, where you're looking at transfer behavior, this could theoretically give you a list of institutions first attended by students who have left your school and enrolled elsewhere. For the PA query, because that one is a backwards looking query, we're going to give you the list of schools last attended before a student applies to your institution. And then for the cohort query, the longitudinal query where everybody has the same search date, that one is a little bit different because it's used to upload for the SAM, Student Achievement Measure purpose. So that aggregate report is more of a matrix where we have outcomes in the rows and academic years in the column. So that one is a little bit different. And then last but not least, we have our student level detail file. The student level detail file, as you'd imagine, is at student level, so we do have to respect blocks whereas we do not have to respect blocks in the aggregate report because it's obviously aggregate reporting. In the detail file, we're able to give you one row per term per institution for each institution attended within that search window, as well as one row per credential or degree record that was reported to us. Okay, so I wanted to give you this screenshot just so that you can see what the FTP account looks like. The FTP account is different than how you access some of the other StudentTracker functionality. For example, we do have a website that's secure where you can go on and get a status of a file that's submitted. It'll tell you whether it's submitted, whether it's passed validations, whether it's in the process of matching, whether it's in the process of generating reports, etc. That is a different screen than what you're seeing here. What you're seeing here is the FTP account. So this is just a little snippet to show you where you would go to upload a request file that you want to have run through StudentTracker. So this is obviously some internal account that we have, this SI1260 StudentTracker. And then within that folder, you can see that there's a receive folder, and that's where you would go to get your StudentTracker reports. And then this is an example. I know you can't see it very clearly. I apologize that the quality is poor, but within that folder, you're going to get 3 reports per submission. One of them is going to be the control report, which is the one in the center. The detail report is going to be at the top. And then in most cases, you're going to see an aggregate report. This particular file I pulled happened to have that premium service I mentioned at the beginning, so they have an additional file called this analysis ready. But in general, you get those 3, the control, the aggregate, and the detail. So now we'll look at what these 3 reports look like. This is the control report. This is the overall report, sort of high level with numbers. How many students did you submit in your file? How many were we able to find? How many had blocks? How many were we able to report out? And then at the bottom, we're giving you some college information as well. And I'm not going to go into all that today, but if you have questions about all of the components of the control report, I encourage you to look at the StudentTracker base service user guide that you can find on the StudentTracker portion of the Clearinghouse's website. The next report that I'm showing you here is an aggregate report. This is one where, because it is aggregate reporting, we are able to include every student that we found, regardless of whether they had FERPA blocks. As I mentioned a minute ago, the aggregate report varies depending on the type of query. So for this one shown, this is for, and you can see up here in the right, I'm hoping you can see my cursor. This poor font says subsequent enrollment, so this is an SE query. So this is going to be the list of institutions from the most popular to the least popular, first attended by students that were in that request file. So this is sort of your list of competitors, or where did the students who left your institutions go on to enroll. For a PA query, a reminder, this would be the list of institutions they attended prior to applying to your institution. And then the last report is probably the meatier report. This is the one that probably has the most value for folks wanting to get some detailed information and do some slice and dice. Here you can see that we have lots of de-identified students as examples. We've got Josiah student in orange, and I will mention that the color coding I put in just for visual purposes today, the detail file you get back does not have any of these color codings. So we have Josiah in orange, we have Joel in white, we have Jesse in green, etc. So for this particular student at the top, Josiah M. student, we're giving you back the information that you gave us. Over here, the next column that's populated says record found. This tells you whether we were able to find and return records for that student in the search window provided. This next column is your search date. That's where you're telling us the window for which you want post-secondary data. And then for each row in this orange, with one exception, you will also see that we're giving you the college code and branch. This is the 8-digit OPE ID. We're giving you the college name, the state, whether it is a 2- or 4-year institution, whether it's public or private, And then for each term that we're reporting, each row, we're giving you the begin and end date for that term. If the enrollment status, which is blank for most of these orange rows, but if we receive that and are able to release it, that's a school's prerogative, that will also be populated in this next column. You will notice that for the student in orange, Josiah, you see enrollment records because you can see begin and end dates for every row except the one that's next to the bottom. That's because this, instead of being an enrollment piece of information, is actually a credential earned. So you see that there's no begin and end date, but if you scroll over to the right, you do have a Y under graduated, which tells you that it is a credential record. And for that record, we're giving you the award date, the degree title, etc. So you're able to get granular information on enrollment and degree records that were within the search window, were reported to us, and are not blocked. All right, so we are at the end of the presentation. I'm going to pause for a second and give folks a minute to put some questions in the Q&A box. If there's a slide that you'd like to go back and see again, I'm happy to do that. If you'd like to see some of our online resources, I'm happy to pull up our user guide or some sample files. Or if you just have a question about something you heard, I'm happy to address those. The one thing that I will mention before I take questions is the pricing. We did not talk about pricing in the presentation. The price for StudentTracker Basic is 10 cents per iPad's enrollment. However, if you are also a degree reporting or degree verified participant, meaning that your institution reports degree information to us, that cuts your StudentTracker cost in half. So it cuts it down to a nickel per iPad's enrollment. Additionally, when your school is reporting enrollment data to us for purposes of compliance primarily, if you include a couple of other pieces of information such as college student ID and college level, I think it's 3 pieces of information, there's something else, major, I believe, then that will enable you to get StudentTracker, the base service, for free. So it is possible to be able to access the service and not pay a penny for it. Once you have a StudentTracker subscription, either paid or free with the criteria I just mentioned, that then gives you the flexibility to use the single student search feature I mentioned earlier, where you can look up a student one at a time. Or you have unlimited access to the batch or request file submissions, where you can send in as many files as you would like with as many students as you would like for those query types we talked about at the beginning. So with that said, I will look to my colleague Danny to see if we have any questions that have come in that need to be answered. Do you have any questions?
See, we have one person just asked about email. They were they receive the presentation.
Okay. Oh, it looks like we have a question coming in. All right, let's see. When using the DA query, do I enter a search date when the term applied for begins or the date forward they were able to apply for? For example, if applying for, I can't see the bottom of this. Let's see if I can move this over here and make it a little bit bigger. There we go. For example, if applying for fall, do I enter an August date or today's date? So generally for the DA query, because you are looking to get the behavior of students who applied to your school but did not attend, we recommend that you use the search date of when your term would have begun. So for a fall semester, that would be, say, August 25th or so. Any enrollment term with a term end date that is after that August 27th date will be returned for that student. So if you happen to have schools in your area where their fall terms start earlier and you're thinking that perhaps August 27th is a little bit late, you could certainly back that up a little bit, maybe August 10th or 15th, just to see if you're getting the information you want. As I mentioned earlier, when you are submitting these request files, we do encourage folks to submit varying versions with different search dates, just so that you can see how the search date works, what type of information you're getting back, and make sure that you're using the appropriate search date to give you the data that you desire. So Brenda, I hope that helps to answer your question. If not, please put a follow-up in there and I'd be happy to answer that as well. We have another question. In the example presented for a request file, I found the header to be confusing because not all the columns with data had labels. Could you go over another example, please? Yes. So I can go back to that slide, but I also want to tell you that when you join StudentTracker and you're ready to submit a request file or a batch file, we do have a guide on our website, and this guide literally starts off as basic as open an Excel spreadsheet. Make sure there's only one tab. Click on this box to select the entire spreadsheet, and then click this button to format it as text. Then in cell A1, you're going to put in H1. Now go to cell H2 and put in your 6-digit OPEID. Then go to cell A3 and put in your branch. So it literally guides you through exactly what goes where. But I am happy to go back to that slide just so that we can talk about the example that I just showed. So in this request file, and I'm hoping that everybody can see this again. So in the first row, you're going to put in H1. That's standard across all of our request files. The next column is going to be your OPEID. Again, this one looks bizarre because it's one of our internal test accounts. Column C is a branch code, and in most cases it's going to be branch 00. In column D is going to be your school name, and when an institution participates with us, we have a name in our system, so you'll want to replicate that. Column E of the header is the file creation date, and that primarily is just for researching and archiving, so we can go back and find the right file in the future if you ever had a question about something that was returned. Column F tells our system what type of query you're running. So if you're looking for subsequent enrollment or transfer behavior, this is where you would see the letters SE. This file was a declined admissions, looking to see where students who didn't go to their school attended. So this is a DA. If you were doing a longitudinal cohort query, this cell would contain the letters CO. And if you were doing the query to look backwards for a group of potential applicants, this cell would contain the letters PA for pending or prior admission. And then column G is either going to have an S or an I, and that is detailed in the guide, and I believe that has to do with whether it's an institution or a system submitting this request file, because this ID that I mentioned, SI 1260, is one of our test accounts. It happens to be for a test system that we use internally, which is why this value in column G is an S, but in most of your cases it would be an I for institution. Then in the rows 2 through 13, you're always going to have a D1 in the first column. Column B will always be blank. Column C is going to be the student's first name. Column D is always going to be middle initial, not middle name, nor inclusion of periods. Column E is going to be student last name. Column F is the student's suffix, if one is available. Column G is the student's birth date in the YYYY MMDD format. Column H is the search date that you want records on for that student. Again, the YYYY MMDD format. So for this first student, John Doe, the search date being provided is May 1st, 2014. So the search window for that student is going to go from May 2nd, because it begins after this date. So John's search window would be May 2nd, 2014, up through today. Column I is always going to be blank, and then columns J and K, again, are school code and branch. If you're thinking to yourself, why do I have to put J and K in here? Because I have the school code and branch in row 1, columns B and C. It's because we do make StudentTracker available to systems. So for example, I'm in Virginia and I'm familiar with the Virginia Community College system. So if the Virginia Community College system wanted to run files from students across different institutions they work with, they could have one student from Germanna and one student from J. Sargent Reynolds and one student from Northern Virginia Community College. So this just gives them the option to look at a group of students across institutions within a system. And then once you get in all of your student rows, you're going to put in something called a trailer row. And this is what alerts our system that we are at the end of the file and there are no more students. That's always going to have a T1 in column A. And then the same Excel row is going to be put into column B. So I think that is probably more detail than you wanted about the request file, but if you have any questions, please let us know, and we certainly have a guide on our website that you can check as well. Give me 1 second here. Super, looks like that, I'm hoping that helped. It was probably more granular than you wanted, but hopefully it was thorough. I don't see that there are any other questions coming in. I'm looking to my colleagues to see if maybe I'm missing something. So we'll wait maybe another 30 seconds to see if anybody has any other questions. If you don't have any questions, I will let you know that this will be available after our presentation on our website. We do have some Clearinghouse Academy resources that I encourage you to visit. There you can find schedules for upcoming webinars and tutorials so that you can get some information. We also have access, on-demand access to prior webinars and tutorials that have been recorded that you can go in when you have time or have a question and get some information. And then I will let you know that in addition to the job I have here, which is helping our customers get their questions answered and get their files in, we do try to attend conferences on a fairly regular basis. This is so that we can alert our participants and potential participants to what we're doing at the Clearinghouse StudentTracker specifically. And we also use that as an opportunity to talk with our customers to find out about, what are your needs? How are you utilizing the service? What kind of questions you have? Do you have any issues I can help with? So I am hoping to be at the National Air Conference in May, as well as a few others. I'm not quite sure when they are, but if you're ever at those conferences, I look forward to meeting you. I will let you know that in addition to the base service, we do have the premium service, as I mentioned earlier. So if you have a question about some of the upcoming Research Center reports, I'm hoping everybody is familiar with our Research Center and knows that we put out national reports on completion and tracking transfers I mentioned earlier. Our premium service, StudentTracker for colleges and universities premium service, does enable schools to get institution-specific versions of those reports. So if you are at Hometown University, you could get a Hometown University Fall 2011 cohort completions report specific to your school. So we are currently in the process of uploading some new data for our completions reports, our persistence and retention reports, and also for our newest report, which is tracking transfer that came out this past May. And I believe that while I was talking, we had another question to come in, so bear with me for just a second. So this question is, how do you know if you have the premium service? So if you are a StudentTracker base participant or customer, then you are eligible to also have the premium service. If you want to find out if you have it, you can do one of two things, because that is an add-on and I would need to check. Every state has somebody called a regional director, and this is a colleague that's assigned to that state to make sure they're aware of our services and manage contracts and whatnot. So I am happy to put you in touch with your regional director. If you would like, you can email me directly, and I would be happy to look up your profile and see, number one, if you have base student tracker, and if so, who the point of contact is and how much you're paying, or maybe tell you that you're getting it for free or how you could get it for free. I can also let you know whether you have the premium service. And if you don't and are interested in more details, I can put you in touch with your regional director. If you would like to write down my email address, it is jilli at studentclearinghouse.org. Again, that's jilli, so Jill I, at studentclearinghouse.org. And you're welcome to call me on my office line as well. That is 703-742-4824. Again, my phone number is 703-742-4824. And email one more time is jilli at studentclearinghouse.org. We have another question that's come in that says, how does a person get access to submit reports for StudentTracker? So that would deal with your FTP account. When a school joins with StudentTracker, quite often the contacts for the StudentTracker account are the person that signed the contract, which often is a provost or a VP, as well as generally maybe a registrar and somebody in billing. But those aren't necessarily the folks that are going to be submitting these request files, which is why I'm assuming this question came in. So the people that are submitting the request files to run through StudentTracker are going to be doing so through the FTP account. So you would need to have your name added as a user for that FTP account. And again, that's something that I'm happy to put you in contact with the right person for. So if you want to send me either an email or give me a phone call, I'm happy to put you in touch with somebody that can help you get added to the appropriate FTP mailbox, where you can upload request files to run through the system, as well as access the 3 reports that are able to be downloaded once the file is done. So hopefully that helped to answer that question. We've had a few questions coming in, so we'll wait another 30 seconds or so and see if anything else comes in. If you've gotten all the information that you need and don't have any questions, feel free to disconnect with my thanks for joining us today. I appreciate your time and interest in our service, and I've given you my contact information, so if you have any questions about the service, the base, or the premium, I'm happy to answer them. And if you have any questions, please do send those. Otherwise, we're going to be logging off in about 30 seconds. I'm getting some thanks from folks for answering questions. So I'm just going to reply with you're very welcome. I'm happy to help, and I appreciate your interest and engagement. All right, I've not been timing this, so I don't know if that's 30 seconds or not, but I don't see any questions. If something does come after the fact, feel free to contact me. Otherwise, we are going to log off and conclude this webinar. But thank you again for your attendance and your interest and your engagement. I'm happy to share the details of our service with you, and look forward to hearing from you with questions and interest. Have a good day.